everyone. Thank you for that intro. My name is Jacqueline Assar. As I mentioned, I am the co-founder of Coresights, a startup that combines biometrics in real time with virtual reality for patients suffering from traumatic spinal cord injury. And I was on the product team at Genius XR.
My name is Schneider. As it was mentioned, I'm an architect by trade, but I was the interface and experience designer on the Genius XR team.
Hi everyone, my name is Emily Pascual. I was working in education games and collaboration tools for the past 3 years. And on this product, I was a product owner, and we made a tool that included lesson libraries for ELs, including a XR Makerspace for collaborative learning, and then also portals for immersive exploratory learning.
Oh, there's our face.
So as Emily mentioned, we designed Genius XR to help ELL students through providing deeper immersion in the subject matter. So if I could get a show of hands, is anyone in the audience, were they a former ELL student by any chance? No, so I actually was. I was an English language learner until 3rd grade. And as you can imagine, unlike static textbooks, AR has the potential to revolutionize language learning by replacing textbooks with dynamic content that students can actually engage with and also ideally be able to create content for. And currently, there are 5 million ELL students in the US, and what is so interesting about this space is that often the students that need technology the most to elevate their classroom learning experience have the least access to it, and we see this with the ELL population. And so you have a problem where ELL students have very specific needs, and the resources are just not going towards those needs, but with technology, you can actually provide solutions that scale. And one statistic that we found really interesting was that in New York State, for example, the overall high school graduation rate is 78%, but for ELLs, it's 37%. And if you let that sink in, it's just unacceptable. And so we wanted to use technology to help fix that problem.
So we asked ourselves a few questions before diving into development, as any good product team would. We wanted to see what the current case is for classrooms with XR, AR, and VR technology. What are they currently using, and how do we take that a step further? We had been working on 360 videos for school trips and different ways that we can show our presentation through that. But we think that there's a lot of ways to include dynamic content to make it more of an interactive experience rather than a consumption-based experience in the classroom. Secondly, really important whenever you're building, especially for classrooms, figuring out what XR device makes the most sense. We felt it was most democratic to use the iPads already throughout a lot of schools have them already. There are also Chromebooks, which you can be more creative with, but we felt with graphic quality and the way that we can make the best applications using what they're familiar with, which are iPads, and which teachers already have professional development with using and have that resource in their classroom. And then thirdly, what does it mean to make a product that is classroom ready? How do you fit into an already existing schedule that a teacher has, that a student needs in order to be successful for that year? And then diving deeper into the classroom requirements to make educational standards. This is fundamental to be taken seriously in a classroom. This is not about just entertaining or being a useful and engaging tool, but also having real educational outcomes. And that's when you can really lean on the educators in the space that are subject matter experts, who can tell you what are those standards. For example, for ELs, we use the WIDA standards 1 and 2. 1 is more instructional and social language learning. And then 2 is informational and then academic learning. And we felt like we could really hone in on that space for ELs as opposed to trying to do the entire 5 standards. You can just pick one and do it really well. It's better to give a product that fully addresses those standards than trying to do all of the standards that don't fully show what your app can do to help those educational outcomes. Finally, I would just encourage anyone who's interested in building for classrooms to take a peek at the 7 ISTE standards, because XR is a great tool for elevating those standards into classrooms. I'm just going to point out like 4 that I think we focused on and that are really useful when integrating AR, VR into the classroom. The first one is empowered learner, and that means that the student is actively engaged in choosing and participating and then demonstrating their knowledge towards an educational outcome. And we all know that VR is a really great tool to empower people and put them in those the driver's seat of an experience. So we felt like an empowered learner standard is one that we could easily hit and also really showcase the tool of XR. Digital citizenship is really important for all teachers who use technology in the classroom, and to have either PD or instructional learning that shows how a child can be responsible in this space, what the ethics look like, how to use this technology responsibly. This can also be a way to show them through using XR to be a good digital citizen in our more interconnected world. And then finally, I'm just going to call out creative communicator. We did the XR Makerspace, which is a collaboration tool, presentation tool for kids to use in 3D space instead of more traditional ebooks or slide presentations. We put it in 3D space, so it's another creative way for kids to demonstrate their knowledge. And then we're going to pass it to Kat on designing the product.
So we had a good understanding of what the standards were and what we needed to do in order to quantify this as a real educational tool, and like Emily said, not entertainment. Something that we've identified really early on as a team was that we have to deal with this conundrum of scaffolding students from the medium that they're familiar with, which is mobile, and moving them comfortably into an XR experience where they feel supported. And one of the ways we felt we could do that was through using color psychology and really emphasizing and making it intentional the way they transition through that experience. So you can see a mock-up of our application landing page where we've used purples and pinks, which are colors that are typically associated with magic, imagination, and implying a sense of mystery for what's around the corner, while still encouraging fascination, creativity, and play. And really getting clear on what these pages were meant to do for the user helped us define that color palette. This is an example of one of the pages that really transitions you to the different XR offerings within the application. And here we're trying to use different shades of blue, which are colors that are associated with creating a sense of security, trust, and really reducing stress before students go into a different learning environment. Lastly, when we land into the XR experience, so these are mock-ups, the gray background would be their physical context, and at this point they're in augmented reality. And for these language lessons, we're really trying to strip the UI down to mostly white so that it falls to the background, and using colors of oranges and pinks, which are associated with drawing attention, stimulating, and getting them excited about this experience that we're giving to them. And that carried through as well to this feature of the XR Makerspace. So there were a lot of design considerations as well to getting this to be as usable as possible. I've already kind of spoken to you a bit about the transition from familiar mobile interfaces into a new experience. We felt strongly that all the UI that was going to be two-dimensional and sort of a relic from mobile could be collapsible. This approach of UI design for education technology in particular really meant we wanted to approach it with a minimalist attitude and making sure that anything that was cluttering the real estate on the screen had a function and wasn't superfluous. From the bottom sketch up is the evolution of some of the menu UI. And it was an interesting challenge. So the middle photo depicts how a child typically holds an iPad. It's 2 hands anchored on either side. Adults are blessed with larger hands, and they can manipulate and move more freely around an iPad with 1 hand and then 1 hand for input. So the first UI was a little bit cluttered. It was a little bit unnecessarily complex, so we sought out to strip it down. The middle one reflected a side collapsible UI, and we still felt like there was a favoritism towards that right-handed, left-handed binary that is prevalent in printed media and mobile UI. And where we landed is the bottom tray that was collapsible, which helped address the input that was likely happening, which is 2 thumbs, both the right hand and left hand are engaged. And then also thinking through the spatial dynamics of how students hold handheld devices. With a background in architecture, we were also able to start looking at these spatial standards that have been defined for a very long time in terms of how you create a really great and productive space. Some of these are standards for office and productivity spaces that are also adapted for children's range of motion. So the first diagram depicts us thinking through what's the optimal angle that the student is holding the iPad so that we can reduce glare, we can reduce a lot of the other complexities that are going to get in the way of them really enjoying and benefiting from the experience. And then the graph on the right is us thinking about how when you have a truly three-dimensional spatial field of view, recognizing that you can design hierarchy, implied hierarchy, through recognizing what is primary in that 30-degree field of view, what becomes tertiary in the 60-degree, and then 120 degrees is really where you're locating things for discovery, and what the range of motion might be realistically for a child.
So another piece that we want to share is just how we built it and what made this flexible and agile product for our users, and how did we incorporate that? So we did bi-weekly Agile Development, and what that means is we did a small slice of work, which included our 3D art assets completed from our artists, the UI that Kat designed in the app, and the engineer having everything in our prototype. Once we had that prototype, we then went into the classroom to test that prototype. We worked with teachers and students in New York, Miami, Michigan, and California. And so we went every 2 weeks to different places and went to a range of schools that were from 3rd grade to 7th grade. And even, it was really interesting, we also did user testing with a deaf classroom, which had different age groups, to see how usable it was for kids of all need levels. And then finally, we incorporated all the feedback we got. And in that feedback, we sit together once after I'd come back, I would share with the group the videos, the surveys, and see what in our roadmap could we adjust to better fit and our users' needs, and listening to the teachers, what they were looking for, how do we get it closer, even just the little things within our team. It pushed us to give our best work from each other. It wasn't that we had one grand vision and we need to hit that vision. It was, all right, this is the long-term idea of where we're gonna go, and the path might look different depending on how our features are received. So I'm gonna dive a little bit deeper into the user research in the classroom and some of the things that I think as a team we learned and know that are great. If you're a developer, if you're a product team, do these things with kids and teachers, because you're going to decide to get the best results. Fundamentally understanding what their classroom setup looks like. There's no classroom that is set up the same. They don't all have the same amount of Wi-Fi. They don't all have the same connectivity. What kind of cables do they need? You can gift them the cable between the iPad and the Promethean board or the smart board, and that is a wonderful thing to leave the classroom, is that connectivity between the iPad and their smart board. Finally, also just making sure that you are strengthening that relationship with the educators you encounter, not just the classroom that you're user testing with, the teacher next door, the teacher on the hallway. How do they feel about education? What are they, and technology, and that relationship between the two? What are they using in the classroom currently? What do they find frustrating about that experience? And how can you help them have a better experience using XR? Not all of them are the biggest fans of technology or XR, and some of them are, but you have to understand where they're coming from in order to give them something that they want to use. Finally, with user research with students, this is the best practices that we came with. Making yourself a part of the environment is essential. If they have a carpet and they're sitting on the carpet, sit on the carpet, don't stand. Make yourself a part of their environment. You are an adult they don't see every day. They don't know you, and they might have a dynamic where they want to give you the right quote-unquote answer, but you want to get the right feedback. And in order to get that right feedback, you need to give them the contextualization, icebreakers. We spent 5 minutes talking about Fortnite because that's what the kids were playing. But then also they have the vocabulary around Pokemon Go, but they don't know that's AR. You need to give them that vocabulary so that they don't feel uncomfortable giving you the feedback that's going to make your product better. And then also they have different opinions about these things. So it's also listening to each individual child and their relationship to technology, and do they just see it as a play, toy? How do they feel about replacing a textbook or a lesson or part of a lesson with XR? And does that engage them? And in what ways can that be an entry point for furthering educational outcomes? And then also just those honesty and comfort checks while you're in the room. That could just be having that adult in the room that they are familiar with and having them be your bounce back point. Oh, how are they feeling about this? What kinds of things are children already familiar with? We used emojis in our surveys because kids really identify with the faces in emojis. They know what a laughing joy face means versus a sleepy face, and that helped us qualify that data, and we visualized it with our team and then shared that back with our headquarters team just to share, okay, this is the sentiment analysis that we created, and this is the direction we're going to go in based on these hard facts, not just the kids liked it. You have to have more. And then how did we incorporate that feedback that we got in the field when we were creating back in the office? So like we said, Kat said earlier about the interface and the experience, we did change quite a bit or add more things with the art. We had these art that you could walk around the fruit. All of the children wanted to see inside of the fruit. So it presents this new design challenge of when you open the fruit, what's the best way to open it? Can we add additional learning points within that? You know, labeling the seeds, different colors, different sizes. Then the product features, we ended with a lesson library with different themes, a makerspace, and to people who aren't in the education space here, makerspace has a rich history in education. It's been really prevalent around the STEAM and STEM communities. STEAM is just with arts included, and it has these labs where kids can iterate on projects and create new things. I've seen this in as young as classrooms with kindergartners using makerspaces, so I really wanted to do a digital version of it. How can we make a 3D makerspace that has those same familiar principles that teachers know, the vocabulary and the curriculum that they're used to in this new XR way? And then finally, we wanted to work on exploratory learning, which allows the students to get that unfamiliar material with their prior background and have their own relationship to it. So they can explore it within an immersive portal, which is they can make those personal connections a lot more than with a 2D image. And now we're gonna press the video. I'm gonna just share with you some of our, can you guys press the space bar? Perfect. So I'm just going to share with you some of the video content that we had from our user testing. This is our very first day, sharing our vocabulary set with these children. They're fourth graders, English language learners from New York City. The girl on the left, she'd only been in the country a few months, and she's like the shyest girl in the class. I learned. I had no idea because they were all jumping out of their seats, ready to play. And this is what we got from our educators.
Make the classroom less teacher-driven and more student-driven. Have the students create different projects. Have them show you their understanding of the XR Makerspace. Let them tell a story. Let them explain the concept. Let them bring something to life with XR Makerspace instead of using something that's not fluid.
This is one of our sample videos. We did a lot of professional development. We'd send these videos to teachers and show them how they can make their own content. The first thing they always ask is, what kind of lessons can we make? So you can give them a quiz on a cube and add your own text and description and headers to it as well. And it's just a fun way to do group activities with kids. And that's why we wanted to include the lesson library portals to get those examples as well. I'm just going to wrap with some of the conclusions we had from our classroom before we go to questions. We really just found that XR really does spark a love of learning. Like I said, we had students and teachers tell us that they're disengaged students who only have a few mediums to demonstrate their knowledge, and this gives them a whole new entry point to spark that love of learning. Secondly, you're going to find that educators are your best collaborators. They're hungry for this knowledge. I know there are educators that came to this conference, and if there are any in this room, I'd love to chat after, because these are the people who you need side by side to tell you the real challenges and the time constraints and the limitations that they have that XR can help with. Finally, you need to design for the space, the persons and the educational outcomes. If they're only spending that time that they would normally with this kind of product at carpet time, then you should be designing for that carpet, for that bulletin, for that desk size. Is it float? Is it going to be stagnant on a surface? You should be making sure that the persons that you're designing for are included. Is it just the educator and the child? Are you also envisioning this to be taken home with parents? And how would that look? And then also just keeping in mind what those educational outcomes are and making that the underlying motivation for you to continue iterating. Thanks so much for coming. I want to thank everyone here for letting us share some of our best practices. And do we have time for questions?